This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Before we begin digging the chapter, this Morgan from Podcast of the Dragon is with us.
Yet again.
Yet again, on a recent episode. What was it? 350 something?
Chapter 13.
Chapter 13?
Yeah, so it was like 358, I think.
So that was, yeah.
Yeah, I just published that one, so.
Yeah. So super happy to have you back. Anything you need to plug or want to plug before we get started?
I was on the Way the Leafs Tavern Talk this last Sunday, which was fun. So if you want to check that out. And then I've been a little lazy about getting my podcast out recently because of personal issues going on. But I'm working on my next episode and we'll get it out hopefully by next Monday. It's been fun to learn Audacity and watch my sound quality get worse and then get better.
Been there.
Yeah.
So it was pretty decent on the phone, and then I'm like, okay. And I fucked up one recording because I was like, yeah, I fucked up some stuff. But I've been getting a lot of good advice from Ryan. Ryan the puppet. Actually, the puppet goes away, and then real Ryan talks to me about it. But yeah, it's just been.
Don't tell people
helpful.
that.
There's a person behind there. Yeah.
No.
What?
Puppets are real.
Yeah, I've got big plans. I've got stuff going on. My father has cancer, and I'm not sure what's going to be going on with all of that. So I'm just trying to have good work-life balance and, just go with the flow and hang out with friends and make as much content as I can without making myself insane. Learn as much computer as I can without making myself insane. And go with the flow without making myself insane.
Creativity is definitely a double-edged sword because it can either drive you crazy or it can keep you sane. There's a real special sweet spot on creativity that I usually don't have. So props to you for making that happen.
Just the general desire for self-improvement. I've got a lot of things I want to learn how to do. I want to branch out into YouTube, and I've still got a lot to learn how to do. And so, it's been a long time since I've been in that whole spiral of you're not doing enough, quick enough, fast enough. I got over that once I got out of my 20s or my mid 30s, but now it's back that I'm actually trying to do things with my life again rather than just coasting along.
Yeah.
Chapter 17, The Triumph of Logic, and our symbol is the Black Aja faces, because we get some Black Aja at the end of this thing, as well as a bunch of other stuff. The Triumph of Logic, again, I think that refers to Falion being white.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely about her perspective on emotion versus logic.
Right, which is... Maybe... I always love the white, because Jordan loves to say, hey, these are motivated reasoning. Most of their logic happens because they are emotional.
I mean, yeah.
And they lie to themselves in saying that it's pure white logic when it's actually almost entirely emotionally based. It's when scientists have a theory or a preference in their thesis and bend the data towards that one.
Yeah. Proving a point is not how you do logic or science. Pro tip.
Motivated reasoning. I think that's come up a couple of times in this series now.
It definitely comes up in this chapter.
Matt stalked out of the palace when Teslyn finally let him go. And had he thought it would do any good, he would have run. The skin between his shoulder blades prickled so, he almost forgot the dice dancing in his head. The worst moment, the very worst of a dozen bad, had been when Teslyn teased his mother, saying she should find herself a pretty for the balls, and Teslyn laughingly claimed a queen had no time for a young man, all while looking at Matt with those bloody eagle's eyes. Now he knew why rabbits ran so fast. He stumped across the Malhara, not seeing anything. Had Nynaeve and Elaine been cavorting with Jacob Carradine, and Elida in the fountain beneath that statue of some long-dead queen, 2 spans or more tall, and pointing to the sea, he would have passed by without a second look. The common room of the wandering woman was dim and comparatively cool after the bright heat outside. He took off his hat gratefully. Faint haze of pipe smoke hung in the air, but the arabesque? Carved... I have to stop there. How are there arabesque carved shutters in the Wheel of Time when there aren't any Arabs?
I had this question when I was looking at my background picture.
You know, I didn't think about the fact that Arab was the root word of arabesque until just now. I just knew, oh, it's like,
It's cool
yeah,
swirly things. It's fine. Yeah, when I was looking
yeah,
at
I'm
this
like,
picture
oh.
and figuring out how to spell it, I was like, there's no Arabs here.
What? It would be like calling it like Catholic-esque architecture.
Yeah.
We know there's no Catholics.
I feel like I've seen another word like this somewhere in these books.
They
and
called
I'm
it
not
like
thinking what it
Gothic.
is.
If he had used like Gothic, I think part of the problem is because arabesque isn't capitalized. Like we use Gothic usually.
And this is where, here's my reasoning, or the reasoning I believe Jordan would throw at us. This book is translated from Common into English. And so whatever word they have for that kind of architecture, the closest thing we have is arabesque.
Yeah.
It's very pretty. Zul put up a good pic.
I just looked it up, and it is a French term derived from the Italian word arabesco, meaning in the Arabic style, according to Wikipedia. So
Seems like a Latin root word for Arab.
But yeah, just imagine that there's some word in common that means the same thing that doesn't have the same root, but has a similar sort of architecture. That's what I'm going with here.
We'll take it. Headcanon accepted.
Headcanon accepted. Okay. And I lost my place because arabesque shutters. A faint haze of pipe smoke hung in the air, but the arabesque carved shutters across the wide arched windows let in more than enough light. Some bedraggled pine branches had been tied above the windows for Swavian night. In one corner, two women with flutes and a fellow with a small drum between his knees provided a shrill, pulsing sort of music that Matt had come to like. Jazz?
I think it's probably more of that Middle Eastern, like, whiny, trilling kind of stuff, which I'm with Matt on that. One of my favorite kinds of
great
music.
Shit. Mm-hmm.
Even at this time of day, there were a few patrons, outland merchants in moderately plain woolens with a sprinkling of Ebou Dar, most in the vests of various guilds. No apprentices or even journeymen here, so close to the palace. The Wandering Woman was hardly an inexpensive place to eat or drink, much less sleep. For me, the Wandering Woman feels like home.
Yeah.
In this series, especially for Matt, like, this is where he lives. This is where he belongs. Like, Matt in The Wandering Woman is Matt in his native habitat.
Yeah, because this is probably one of the spots that he stays for the longest in the course of the whole series. Even with being in the palace for a lot of that, like, the band is hanging out over here, so.
At this point, they've been in Ebou Dar over a month, and so they've been there the whole time. He's only going to be there a couple more days before they get moved into the palace.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, they live in the palace until they leave.
He does keep his valuables and clothes under the tiles, though, so he is constantly visiting the Wandering Woman. His relationship with Satal Anan is significant. Doesn't, Oliver spend a bunch of time there as well? Yeah.
Yeah, and Joline hides out in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
That's right, yeah. It has a lot to do with just the ease at which he finds himself there, and maybe part of that is just me feeling very at home in bars, but to me, this Wandering Woman is always, like, one of the most comfortable places. Like, if someone was like, where would you want to spend, that's like, if you got transported into the Wheel of Time and had to, like, pick a town to spend your time in, I'd be like, I'd chill in Ebou Dar at the Wandering Woman.
Yeah, definitely. I want some of the food, I want the music, like, the whole thing sounds great.
Right.
I mean, not the duels, but, I think it's probably my favorite city, and I'm glad that they spend so much time there. I'm glad he picked such a colorful city that just seems so full of life and, I don't know, sunny. And I mean, everything is sunny right now because the world's burning up, but just, I don't know, there's just lots of fun and joie de vivre, and it seems like a great place to live beyond everyone wanting to stab each other. I guess it doesn't really seem like a great place to live, but it's a great place to live in a literary sense because it's just fun.
I think we've compared it before to New Orleans.
Yeah?
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, not that I've ever been there, so I can't, but...
At least from the stereotypes. Like, seems like a fun place, a little dangerous, but a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Parties.
Parties, kind of a swamp-like, a lot of mud.
Yeah, very distinctive food, and a port, and some wild storms coming off the coast. And we were comparing it recently to, you and I, Seth, were talking about, like, what kind of coastline it's on. I was saying it seems more like a Gulf Coast thing in terms of the way the hurricanes come on shore rather than like a Pacific Coast thing. So that also makes it very much like New Orleans.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe he modeled it on New Orleans.
I kind of assume he did. That's just a just geography, and based on where he lived, I have the feeling like New Orleans is something he would have known about. It's a very distinctive city in the South.
I mean, I always thought Ilion was New Orleans, but part of that was just the scene in book 2 with Vale Dome and, walking through all the people cavorting in the street. But I don't see why Ebou Dar wouldn't be too, or just like a mix of the two. So
Right, he could have taken his favorite sides and split them out into 2 different cities.
I mean, these are both cities on the southern coast of our continent at the same latitude, at the base of very large rivers. So
yeah, and we've only got one of those in this country, so.
And culturally, but it seems like they'd be fairly similar, the big difference being the difference between the countries, essentially.
Yeah, the social mores of the nations. Yeah, because Ebou Dar has a lot more class mixing than Ilion.
Yeah.
But it also has a female-dominated society, whereas Ilion is definitely a male-dominated nobility society, whereas the nobility seemed less important in Ebou Dar, but the women are super important.
It's more of a mercantile dominated thing, because it's all about the guilds, right? The guilds are who really controls shit, whereas in Ilion, it's like, I have the army, so fuck you.
So the difference between a monarchy and a
oligarchy? Am I getting that right?
I was gonna say maybe an oligarchy. I was gonna say even just a
capitalism.
Yes, in capitalism, that thing. Because Ebou Dar does seem to be mostly ruled by capitalism.
Yeah.
The nobility doesn't have a lot of power,
except they actually have labor laws.
Guilds.
Yeah, they actually have unions. I mean, guilds.
Even the beggar guilds have. Beggars have guilds.
Yeah.
Which leads to Old Cully, who's just like he's climbing the rank of the beggar guilds. That's why he became a Dark Friend, just to get that advantage. But like he's not trying to step outside of his guild. He just wants more power within his guild.
That's fucking great.
The only other thing I wanted to say is Swovian Night is he references it quite a number of times. That's when Birgitta goes to Matt and is like, "Hey, guess what?
Yeah,
we need your help."
So.
And I'm and Matt figures out that she's the actual Birgitta.
Yeah,
reborn.
that's their night of drinking insanely.
What happens is that everything happens in one day as far as, our first chapter in Ebou Dar is the one from Avienda's point of view. So where we're at now, this is all the same day. So they go to the Sea Folk for the Bowl of the Winds. At the same time, Matt is at the Silver Circuit, and then he sees Lady Shiane, follows her, sees that Jacob Carradine is hosting Dark Friends, comes back, leaves the letter with Teslyn, and then so he's going into the Wandering Woman now. They kind of have that whole thing going on at the same time. And so you hear when they're at the Silver Circuit, I believe that they have been in Ebou Dar for over a month. And I think what is going to happen is that, Birgitta will come and tell him. And then in the morning, the girls come over and they apologize to him and then move him into the palace. And at the same time, they get taken by Satala Anan to the kin.
Yes.
And so it's at least one more day before they go back with the Aes Sedai. So it's at least a couple more days. But it's over a very short period of time. And I think it's just, and I was thinking about that because I was kind of like, okay, well, why would he have shown very much more? That they've been in Ebou Dar, the girls have been going out and, doing their thing and hiding from him. And he's been, dicing and going to horse races. And other than that, being frustrated. And so that's been happening for a month, basically. And then bam, 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 everything at once.
Yeah, it's a very fast week.
And then his relationship with Teslyn mostly takes place off camera.
Yeah.
Between books. After the wall falls on him, he is essentially nursed back to health in the palace.
Yeah.
The only other thing is that he needs time for Teslyn to starve him out before she's able, he locks her out of his room. There's at least 2 or 3 days before she rapes him where he's in the palace. So,
I thought she assaulted him once, and then there's a couple days where she plays with him.
I mean, yeah, she basically, sits in his lap and tears half his clothes off before like Tom shows up or
Oh, right,
whatever.
yeah.
Then he locks his door, and then she's like denying him food. Everybody's denying him food, so she starves him out for at least a day, and then she comes in and steals his key and rapes him at that point.
Yeah, that's when he tries to use Oliver as a defense, and she sends Oliver off with Roselle to some festival or other.
Yeah, they move him out of the sulking room.
But yeah,
I believe the Festival of the Birds is coming up.
Yeah, I think it's the Festival of Birds. So Swolvan Night is when he gets drunk with Regita. Festival of Birds is when Teslyn does her thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, and there's some time in between.
And it's like a week because the Ebou Dar are like, party time every weekend. Let's get drunk. It's been about a month in the city, and there's about a week left, and then there's a whole off-screen month where he's healing. So Ebou Dar it goes in fits and starts. Is what happens in Ebou Dar.
But I like this little bit from Matt's point of view. It's like not a lot happens except that you get some, creepy foreshadowing from Teslyn being predatory, and you get foreshadowing for the fog, the bubble of evil, where Rand ends up getting stabbed by Padden Fane because Harnan tells Rand about the fog descending in the Rahad, and people disappeared and some were found, parts of them eaten, and it's basically exactly the same type of fog that lands on the party in Caira.
But it's not, right? Because that fog has to be Padden Fane and Mashadar. This is a bubble of evil, right? Because Padden Fane's nowhere near here, right?
I don't think it is. I think that fog just happens to be a coincidental bubble of evil.
But it follows the same pattern. I'd never thought about that. That the people being eaten, that comes out of Padden Fane's fog too. Because that's not just Mashadar. That's like Mashadar plus or something.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it's just coincidental. Like the fog descended either because Rand was there and he drew it to them. And it's like having it be a fog is annoying because then it's sort of like you can get it confused for being something to do with Mashadar. But I'm pretty positive, and I don't remember where I read it, but that is a bubble of evil. So
I mean, it definitely seems to be, and Matt's convinced that it is. And there's no indication that this is Padden Fane.
No,
right?
No, for sure not.
No, and it doesn't do anything like to seek him out. So yeah, it's just the world falling apart casually at the seams.
Right before that, we get the little meme about Oliver and how all he's doing is checking out the girls, and he's learning that from all of his uncles. When of course it's Matt that he's learning it from.
Yeah, he gets spanked for pinching a girl's bottom, and Matt's like, he'll live. It's like, yeah, you would know because you've gone through that.
Does Matt ever actually pinch anybody?
I think so.
I'm pretty sure
we don't see it, but his casualness here definitely says that he's been around that block before.
Especially when girls will sit on his lap, he'll pinch their bottoms while they're sitting on his lap type situation.
I also noticed here there's a another thing to support the Vannon as red herring thing, because news that Jacob Carradine had dark friends coming to call screwed Vannon's round face into a scowl. Like, if he was a dark friend or even a Forsaken in disguise, he might be frustrated not because there's dark friends, but because they might get in the way of his plans.
I love that you're picking that up and running with it.
It makes so much sense.
Or at least and
he can slip by a warder unseen. Like, he's really giving you reasons to distrust this guy. He really is. And I never did until you pointed it out. I always just trusted him.
And he doesn't like any nobles except Elaine for some reason.
But yeah, it's as much as I don't, condone child abuse or, sexual assault, it's still cute, the whole hypocrisy that Matt has around who's parenting Oliver and how.
He's like, oh, those behaviors are awful. We don't want children with, and then is immediately going around and doing them himself. Yes. Right? The hypocriticalness there of Matt is just delicious.
And then we get Caira. That's the next thing I have is Caira.
Who's really eager to go upstairs with Matt. Yeah.
There's multiple references when I looked her up to, she basically every time she encounters Matt, she tries to sleep with him. And he's like, nope, Mr. Sinan, I'm not dealing with Mr. Sinan. I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole.
I don't know. I got the impression that they had been fucking.
Yeah, same. I totally got the impression that they were definitely repeated contact.
I got the feeling that she wanted to, and he was frustrated that she was never able to get him in bed.
I mean, he sticks a coin down her cleavage and taps her on the nose and says, maybe later. That seemed pretty there's rapport there to me.
Yeah.
Plus, she gets really bitchy when Nynaeve and Elaine come by, like jealous bitchy.
I'm reading. I read all that as she wanted to sleep with him, and he was saying no, and she was jealous of other women who she presumed were sleeping with him. But you make a good point that maybe if they had been, I mean, because his thoughts later is like, I wouldn't touch any of them with a 10-foot pole.
You wouldn't touch any of Mistress Ainan's daughters, but Caira isn't one of her daughters.
But she looks after her serving women almost as closely as her daughters. So.
Right.
Fair.
But also, like, if Caira wants it and Matt's not forcing it, I can't really see why Mistress Onan wasn't nice to die. She might have very strong opinions. I don't know.
Yes.
I never thought of there being a barrier there. I always thought of that as being like a satisfactory arrangement to all parties. But chat is not agreeing with us, Morgan.
Oh yeah, folks are with me. I'm telling you, she wants to sleep with him, and he has not been taking advantage of that, which he would at most inns.
Keith agrees with not Seth. Okay, but then we have Matt go upstairs, and he nearly gets murdered / kidnapped, and then tells himself that, they were thieves, because Matt has this constant theme throughout the stories of, deluding himself about incredibly obvious things and saying they can't be what they so obviously are. And I think that this bit of the man coming in to look for him, saying he's an illuminator, can I have a meal? I want Matt to pay for it, and then leaving is the scout coming out and and checking to make sure that Matt's there or not there, so that the people can come in and lie in wait.
And I think it's definitely a kidnapping attempt.
What I want to know is who sent it, because this very day, he follows Lady Shiane to Jacob Carradon's palace. Carradon sees him and tells Samael, I see Matt Cawthon, but Samael specifically tells Jacob Carradon, you're not to go after Cawthon.
But Carradon immediately contradicts that, and as soon as the vision is over, turns right back to Skane and says, go after Cawthon.
Oh, did she tell? Okay.
He does.
I missed that part.
Yeah, so because of the compulsion from Ishamael in his head, he cannot not go after Matt.
I missed that. Okay.
In that episode, I just edited that episode, which is why it's fresh in my head.
Okay.
So he turns around and says,
You'll put your circle to it.
And then his thought is, no one survived disobeying the Chosen, which is exactly what he's doing. Mm-hmm. And so this is entirely sent by Cheyenne. They tracked him down. They knew he was looking for an illuminator. The reason he's looking for an illuminator, Min had a vision saying he needed an illuminator.
Really?
Okay. I
forgot about that.
So he's put out word that he's looking for an illuminator, so they send him an illuminator to scout out.
When did Min tell him he needs an illuminator?
She had a vision.
I just thought he had a vision of fireworks or something.
I remember the dream of him catching a firework in his hand and killing people as a result, but I do not remember Min telling him he needed an illuminator.
I'm guessing he just remembered the blowing the hole in the stone and was like, I'd like to see what I can do with that again.
He's just a pyromaniac.
It's like, if I can blow a hole in the stone with that many fireworks, what can I do if I have even more explosives?
Yeah, I was wondering about that when I was reading this to do my notes. I'm like, why did he decide he needed an illuminator? Because, a Min vision makes as much sense as anything else. I just don't remember that. I don't remember anything.
That also him thinking strategically, right? The fact that he's been thinking about tossing basically taking a catapult and tossing a bundle of fireworks into the middle of a group of Trollocs to kill them, right? That's his thought, is that's how I kill Trollocs. And then, of course, when he runs into an actual Illuminator, Aludra, she's like, no, I thought about it. She's like, no, I've got...
No, go find me a bell founder. That's what you really need.
That's what you really need. She's figured out cannons. She's gone, which are... versus a catapult, which she's like, no, I can use the explosion as propulsion, and then the mass is the explosion, where he's doing the other way around. He's thinking, you just throw them like normal things, and then when they explode, they do the damage then.
Yeah. But he was in the palace for hours, so that gives Millie Skane time to have whipped together this kidnapping attempt, which is one of at least two.
Yeah, there are at least two. There's the beggars who hop on him out in the street. That's the only two I can remember. I could have sworn there was another one, though.
I would not be surprised if we find another one as we go through.
Yeah, I mean, the beggars is the big one, right?
Because they have a sack that would have fit over him to his knees. But this one, it had a chest that they didn't want to carry anybody up in, or they didn't want to let anyone else carry up. They were trying to do a mat in a box situation.
Definitely. And as you can see, because it's an empty box, the guy his dead body ends up in the box. Yeah.
It's big enough to hold an entire corpse.
So the other thing I was going to say, and obviously this happened before this chapter, but at the moment that he sees Shiane go into Jacob Carradin's palace, the dice start in his head. And I don't know if that's just coincidence that at that point the Shanshan have set off from Tremalking or from Cantorn Harbor or whatever and have begun the advance onto Ebou Dar, because they end when the building falls on him, basically. I don't know if that's about a week or something, but he's wondering why he's had all of this shitty stuff goes on and they're still rattling. He's like, I get...
We kind of thought it started because, it's summoned Samael, but then we speculated that Samael wasn't actually summoned. He was just making his regular rounds to check on the thing. So yeah, that makes sense that it's more has to do with the coincidence of them setting out and less to do with,
endless shitty things happen, and he's like, why haven't they stopped? Why haven't they stopped?
I agree, because I don't know how long it takes them to sail there, but maybe that's when they decide Ebou Dar is going to be the city that they land at or something. But yeah, you're right. It's because, the wall is falling on him and he's like, now the dice stop? So yeah, you're right. That's got to be what it is.
What happened to my bloody luck?
Tracing out where his dice rolls come from and lead to is like, I've never actually done it properly throughout the whole series. Some of them are easy and some of them just like, I don't know, but I like that.
Yeah, I went back to try to figure out when was the first time he hears the dice, which is when he goes to let the girls out of the Stone of Tear. I'm doing an episode on him now where I'm trying to track, explore as he's exploring his luck, because basically he has one book in The Dragon Reborn to explore that single ability before he starts getting more abilities. So it's kind of interesting to look at that. Yeah, he ends up getting kind of set up in this situation where he feels really trapped, as he's talking about how he knows how the rabbit feels, because she's such a shit. And it's sort of having all of the people kind of justify it for him, even Mistress Ainen later on being pretties are a time-honored thing in Ebou Dar, and it's, she's going a little overboard, and just kind of and I know that Ebou Dar is kind of doing kind of a reverse culture of a place where, men don't have rights, because how many cultures are there in the world where if it's a woman's word against a man, nobody's going to believe a woman, or, if a man kills a woman, he can just get away with it and nobody cares, or all of those types of cultures. But it's just sort of when you do it like that and then you make it less serious, then it seems like you treat those things less serious. And so it's just, I don't know.
Yeah, violence somehow ups the intensity, and it's but it doesn't necessarily. Non-violent things can still be just as awful as violent things.
Yeah, and I think that, I'm assuming he was exposed to a lot of violent sexual assault in Vietnam, and so he just could not understand the nuance that so many women are faced with in more uncomfortable, less violent situations.
At least he keeps phrasing her as a predator, so we can say she's predatory, and it completely works within the verbiage he used.
So now it's Teslyn the creepy cougar instead of Lanfear the creepy cougar, so...
Yeah, seriously.
Right, the age difference between Lanfear and Rand?
Much worse, yeah.
Much worse, yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't really qualify in the half your age plus 7 category.
I heard you use that half your age plus 7, and I take offense to it, but that's just me, because...
Morgan, the funny thing is, I'm not feeling... I'm way outside that range as well
I know
now.
that. I listened to an episode today where you were like, the half your age plus 7, and I'm like, wait, what the fuck, Seth? I know you're picking that rule.
It's more of a suggestion, really.
Yeah. I don't know. I was talking to my wife yesterday about the inherent ageism of people who immediately slap a creep label on someone dating someone so young. And she's like, wait, how is it ageist? I'm like, well, it's telling a young person that they're basically, a child and they don't have the right to choose for themselves who they can date, and that, they have to be infantilized. And she's like, you know what? You're fucking right. And I was just kind of like, there you go.
Yeah, as someone who was legally a child when I got together with my husband, yeah, there's a lot of discrimination that can go into being like, you're not old enough. And it's like, people used to die at 40. 15 used to be considered adulthood. Like, standards change. They are not universal truths or universally applicable.
I'm not a bad person for dating someone who's younger than I am.
No, you're just a bad person inherently.
Right. I mean, I have other reasons for being a bad person.
There's so many other reasons you're terrible.
I'm really, really awful.
Yeah, I had a choice. My wife was a fucking adult, and I could either, give her that respect, or I could ruin any chance of having any kind of friendship with her at all, because she would have been like, how about fuck yourself, if I was like, I'm sorry, but you're too young. She would have been so mortally offended by that.
Do you mean that literally when you said she's a fucking adult? As a verb?
Sometimes.
Constantly.
On occasion, yes.
Yeah. But yeah, physical assault. Matt uses his luck to not get his skull split, and it's awesome.
What do you think about just the one floorboard squeaking, even though her...
I mean, also, I think it's nonsense that none of the floorboards squeak, because have you been in a building?
Well, so you can actually, if you are handy, which I assume her husband is, and she does demand perfection, you can actually go in and shimmy any floorboards that squeak. So you can go underneath and bring them up. So that could be something that, like, she has a lot of pride in, like, making sure that if there's any gaps or anything like that, they get shimmed. I said shimmied. Shimmed.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah. And maybe what she's saying is they don't squeak unless someone steps on them. It's not like, some houses are constantly shifting and squeaking in old and creaky houses, right? With the wind and the floors and stuff like that. Maybe the boards only squeak when someone actually steps on them.
Yeah, buildings settle, like...
Maybe it's not normal for the boards to squeak under the weight of one person, but the guy was, like, right behind Matt, so maybe they both were stepping on the same board, and it just took the weight of both of them to make it squeak. That's my best bet, beyond luck.
I've been in too many buildings and helped build and remodel too many buildings. I just don't buy the floorboards don't squeak. It's like, Robert Jordan, you weren't an architect either, were you? Or a contractor, I should say. Not a general contractor.
Not a juggler, not an architect, and did not know how to put on makeup.
Not a geographer, not a linguist.
Here's another alternative. The floorboards squeaked all the time, and the only reason Matt noticed this is because his luck made him notice this.
Yeah, and he's just not, unreliable narrating his prior experiences with the building. Yeah, that honestly makes more sense. Because, like, sometimes, a normal noise will catch your ear different than it did the other, 100 times that it did, for whatever reason.
And, I feel like a squeak of a building shifting is different from a squeak of someone settling their weight onto a floorboard.
For sure. No, I meant building shift in the sense that those shims are only going to last for a few months before the building has moved and, made a gap again. So... I don't know.
Especially in Ebou Dar. Ebou Dar seems like a swampy...
Exactly.
It seems like it's not the most... It's not built on bedrock. Yeah.
Like, the wood is going to be, expanding and contracting seasonally.
Right, all the time. Yeah, totally. I would counter with that is it's fairly temperate temperature, so it's not like it's getting, 40 below and then getting up really hot. It's just hot and staying hot.
Yeah, it gets more humid and less humid, but it's always humid. Fair.
I always imagined it at dry heat, and Ilion, which is a lot further south, is humid. But... I could be wrong.
I bet it actually does change with the season. I bet if the winds are coming onshore versus offshore, it radically changes. Because you're right, Ilion was just swamp ass, pure swamp ass.
The whole point of this assault, and what we learn later about how they're picky about the room, is their goal was to get the room right across from his, have the chest open. This guy was just going to choke him out and throw him in the chest and kidnap him.
Yeah, and they were going to, take their box and go home, or whatever.
And the idea would he would disappear with no struggle, and the room they wanted was just the closest room to his.
Mm-hmm. It was a very quickly put together attempt. They only had, half of an afternoon to decide they needed to get him, figure out where he is, come up with a plan, scout the space, and then make it happen. It's quite impressive. But, I mean, it is at Millie Skane's direction, and she is quite impressive as an assassin and leader of Dark Friends, so that fits.
Does anyone have any clues who these two are other than generic Dark Friends?
I think they're just red shirts.
Yeah, pretty much. I wanted to say that the panky, pale-haired man was that one Shan Chan guy, but it's not. Multiple people have pale hair that are stalking Matt. And the only thing is, oh, well, this guy doesn't look like a thief. It's because he's a dark friend, Matt.
Right, he's rich. He's not trying to steal money from you. He's trying to kidnap you and put you in a box.
Yeah. Do you think they were trying to kill him or just kidnap him?
Kidnap him, or else they wouldn't have the empty... Or else he wouldn't have just used his hands to strangle him. Right?
Well, there's the truncheon.
You break somebody's skull, you knock them unconscious. That's different than a sword.
Okay.
Or...
Yeah, in the Wheel of Time, if somebody just hits you on the head, you'll be fine.
Yeah, you'll be fine. That's fine. And worst case scenario, they do address that with Elaine, and getting her skull cracked with the sling.
Yeah,
that's fair. By Nynaeve. Once.
And then the other guy does grab a dagger and a cudgel to attack him, but
it's after he's already killed his other guy. So
yeah, I think you're right. So then the question is, what were they going to do with Matt? Who were they going to take him to, and what was that supposed to turn into?
I think he would have gone right back to the Chelsea Palace to Jacob Carradine, and at that point, who knows? Because if it's Moradin who's looking for him, or Ishamael, we don't see Moradin until a little bit later on. So I don't know what they would have done. Held on to him, waiting for the Chosen, probably have him accidentally die in their, piss poor care. I have no idea.
Yeah, I just always wonder, like, what were you going to do if you actually managed to capture him? Like, what's the next step in the process?
I can imagine him and Millie Skane, like, having it out again. That would be interesting. Like, you tried to kill me, and now I'm succeeding. Huh.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
It's also, I love this, it's good to be lucky, Matt croaked as he survives. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Better to be lucky than good.
And then we have a frying pan as a weapon moment, which is adorable.
It's one of the reasons I really, really like Nerim, is his whole, like, yes, I just walk out with a pan. He's willing to go toe-to-toe with whatever Matt's dealing with a freaking cast iron, or with a pan.
Yeah, it's such a Samwise Gamgee moment. He's like trying to hide it behind his back, like, who, me? No, I just happened to be cooking some eggs, my lord.
And then this whole, like, could you stop getting blood in your clothes, please, sir? Like,
I freaking love that. He's like, look, okay, I get it that you have to kill people when they try to kill you, but could you be considerate about it?
Yeah, I love Nerim. I think he's one of the best, like, small characters that just for comic relief that RJ writes. And then Mistress Ainen and Jasper show up, and...
You know how I know this is New Orleans? This place has more insects than I have ever seen, my lord. Yeah, it's the South. It's definitely the South. It's just swarming with beetles and cockroaches and June bugs, and this year
Brood X.
Yeah, Brood X. It's bad.
I'm pretty sure I was on the East Coast for a cicada hatch out. Shit, was it Brood X?
17 years ago?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a cicada year, but it wasn't Brood X. Yeah, because that would have been 2006. But yeah, I was introduced to what it sounds like when the trees are screaming, and I did not really appreciate. So apparently it's a lot worse this year. I did not experience the level that is happening this year.
I definitely grew up during certain cicada waves. I couldn't have given you a year, but I remember, cicadas were pretty common in various places where I grew up, where I thought they, like, happened everywhere all the time. I thought that screaming summer thing was just common.
Yeah, there's a great meme I've seen that's like, just like, why are the trees screaming? Oh, they just do that. It's just, the trees scream every few years. It's fine.
Listen, nothing matches the time I had to, when I lived in Texas, every summer we'd swim in an outdoor pool, and they'd leave the lights on overnight in the pool, and so June bugs would swarm to the surface of the pool and drown. Ugh. And so we'd get there for 6 a.m. practice outside, and the whole surface of the pool would be literally coated with June bugs, to the point where you couldn't see the water. It looked like a bunch of floating beads on the surface of a pool. And you dive in, and you do your first lap just with breaststroke with your head out of the water, trying to push the beetles onto the lane lines, and they'd, like, collect on the lane.
This is incorrect.
And then you'd have to swim the rest of the practice, just trying not... You'd always try and breathe with your teeth clenched, so you wouldn't suck in a June bug in your mouth.
I hate everything about this! God.
Swimming outdoors in Texas was an experience, yeah.
Resistance training with beetles.
Yeah, it was bad.
That is so awful. Definitely happens in Ebou Dar.
The trade-off then is, I'll tell you what, swimming backstroke under a full moon and stars is kind of gorgeous. Like,
I can see that.
It's hard to pass up. I think at one point I remember practicing during a lunar eclipse, and so I watched the moon turn red while doing backstroke, and so like there was some real benefits to being in an outdoor pool, and like you didn't have to deal with the chlorine air they have to deal with the indoor pool as well. So just like outdoor pools are really nice, and Texas is one of the few places in the country that can keep them going year round.
Okay, where are we at?
The Ancient and Honorable League of the Nets.
I love their names. Yeah, I noticed that they use white stones in his earring to mark how many boats he's got, and it reminds me of the white stones in the marriage knives. Like, they've got a thing about using white stones to demarcate various facts about you that people should know. And
with the women, it's children. With the men, it's boats.
Yeah, I feel like one of those things is less important than the other one, but I don't know. I don't have a boat or a child, so...
I was going to say, yeah, boats require generations to pay off. Children, you can have those at any time. Boats are clearly more important. The children, they can die in a duel at any time. The boat is your income for your family forever.
Until it sinks.
That's actually, have you ever read Robin Hobb?
No.
Live Ship Traders? It's all about families going into debt to pay for boats. And sacrificing for the boat. Now the boat is magical and comes to life. That's all. Highly recommend Robin Hobb. Her series is just fantastic.
Fair enough. You're like the fourth person to recommend that author to me, so maybe I'll put her on the list. Should we return to Mistress Anand's bosom and how Matt's not looking at it?
I am always willing to return to Mistress Anand's bosom.
Yeah, I want to return there. Or she's fingering the hilt between her breasts, or because Jasper spoke out of line, or...
Yeah, that part gets into the and we have a culture where spousal abuse is approved of. That's great. That's just lovely.
But I do feel like what he's trying to do is literally take 1950s America and turn it on its head. This is the situation where women weren't allowed to express their opinion, and men would look at them like, you're in trouble, right? You are absolutely in trouble for expressing your opinion in front of company. Like... Go back to Mad Men and watch that, and you can't say that Don Draper wouldn't be mad at his wife in the exact same way for speaking out of turn at a conference about ads.
Yeah, it's, we were kind of talking about it's like trying to represent any number of cultures that exist today where, women basically can be killed by their husbands and husbands don't have to, explain for it. And yeah, it's just that it's portrayed in such a lighthearted fashion, and so it makes it's kind of fucked up. And I get that RJ didn't want to write anything that was super grim, so it's almost like he wanted to have that kind of disparity, maybe in a sense of almost being like, how do you like it, boys? And then in a sense of, let's have something different. Let's have a world where, we might have enough of an extreme of gender roles in a certain culture where it would get to this, but also just like he had enough darkness in his world that he wanted to make a world where it would be realistic enough that, yes, there would be darkness, but he didn't want to get too deeply down into it, not so deeply that it was like painful or like horrifically painful.
Right, dressing it up with humor just to soften the blow a little bit.
But I do see Ebou Dar as an inverted misogynistic culture, right? It is a culture where women really are seen as better than men. It's so weirdly offensive to us because we're so used to cultures where men are seen as better than women, and maybe where women are considered equal to men. I mean, I would like to live in that society, but I don't think we do yet. But and then to see the inverse where it's like, not only are men not seen as equal, they're seen as lesser. Like, shut the fuck up. Your opinion doesn't matter. Like, stop talking. I'll cut you if you keep talking. And Outlanders maybe have a slightly different standard. Maybe Matt is viewed as slightly better than the men of Ebou Dar because he is an Outlander, but...
And Mistress Anand, isn't an Ebou Dar, so she's still, taking it on as an external culture.
She's a Borderlander. She is Aes Sedai. or was Aes Sedai, and so the culture of being Aes Sedai is a lot of people who are less, which is anyone who is not Aes Sedai, being in their place.
Yeah, I was just seeing the line where she's like, many of my girlfriends are telling me that I'm too nice to you. And it's like that, it shows that she's, she's adopted Ebou Dar as much as an Aes Sedai is going to adopt anything because she's going to throw her whole heart into it. But she's also like, I'm really nice to him. I only cut him sometimes. It's like, good for you.
Interesting contrast too to like formatting culture, because it's like you could say that men are treated better in formatting in the sense that the physical abuse is not tolerated. And I don't think that, if women were to stab men in formatting, you would be, you would face legal charges for that. If you were to strike your husband or anything like that, except for the types of straps that they have in the inn that Brandon men are staying at.
But formatting also doesn't have the kin.
At the same time, men are almost kept in like a permanent stage of childishness. They are not allowed even a level of agency, which men in Ebou Dar are definitely granted, and it's almost like a privilege to even teach them to read or something, and so it's in some ways almost even more offensive.
Well, I think in Ebou Dar, you just have a general culture of physical violence and fighting and flamboyance. And then in formatting, everything is more staid and more regulated and calmer. And
formatting's a bureaucracy.
Yeah, it's a lot less high energy. But yeah, the essentially financial control over the men is just as confining and abusive. Mm-hmm. It's just that they're much less flamboyant with the physical violence. But it's like, if a woman does really well, she might give her man a little extra money for a fancier hair clip. And it's like, that's on the list of red flags for abusive relationships. So, yeesh.
Yeah, to control all of the money.
But again, bring you back to 1950s America, where women couldn't get a bank account without their husband's permission.
Oh my God.
And it seems like formatting is much more a corollary to 1950s America, and it feels like Ebou Dar is more of a corollary to certain Middle Eastern cultures maybe, or where it's acceptable to kill a woman if she pisses you off too much, or she does something that
Europe instead of 1950s. Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, I like about formatting being a bureaucracy. That's really 1950s America. Like everything is in a box. That's very, very formatting. I do not like formatting. I like Ebou Dar way more than formatting. Even though Varen comes from formatting, but she also got the fuck out and didn't go back until the Dragon Reborn needed her to. So
she did get the fuck out. Also, she did something that got her in trouble there, and I want to know what.
She probably was nice to her boyfriend.
So I don't know how further you want to go on until we get to the note.
He puts his dagger away and his fingers brush paper, and that's the first time he notices the note from Teslyn.
And he pulls it out right then.
He opens it and Mistress Ain asks if it's bad news, and he just says something like, does anybody ever understand women, not just Aes Sedai, any women? And Jasper starts to laugh, at which point Mistress Ain punches him in the ribs. So...
And he keeps laughing, that wheezed, I have no breath, but I'm still laughing.
Yeah. Which is very much an echo of that scene with Ruark and his two wives, and it's just like, yes, spousal abuse. Ha ha ha.
Actually,
so
I think
funny.
It was Bael who gets stabbed by Elaine.
Right.
But I like his quick deduction of looking at it. He's like, okay, I was in a four-way tug of war with Vandina, Dalius, Teslyn, and Joline. So who's it gotta be? And then usually he tells himself, if something can't be a certain way, then it just can't be that way. Like that giant box couldn't possibly have been to kidnap him, even though it's illogical that a thief would want to do X, Y, or Z.
He did the same thing that night in Tarvalin when he got healed. That night he had a bunch of dark friends after him. They were trying to take him down, and he's like, why are the thieves coming after me? It's like, they're never thieves, they're always dark friends.
Yeah, and then it's always about Elaine's letter. Yeah, it's always dark friends. And at some point, it's like he's saying that because they were picky about the room, it's like even a thief can be tight-fisted. when Mistress Ainen is like, you think it was chance, and he's like, what else? Says she had no answer, but she frowned at the corpses again. Maybe she was not so sanguine as he had thought. She was not native to Ebou Dar, after all. And I was like, no, Matt, she's thinking in her head, God, he's a dumbass.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
how could you be so willfully clueless? But it's like, in this case, his powers of deduction are really good because he's telling himself, oh no, it couldn't have been Teslyn or Joline. They wouldn't do that. And then thinking, well, it has to be one of them because that's the only way it makes sense based upon the point of what it says. It doesn't make sense that it would be Vandine or Adalia's.
Yeah. One thing that I noticed with this note is that it doesn't line up with what Teslyn and Joline talk about.
No.
In the POV. Like, Teslyn has layers.
Teslyn's lying to Joline. Yeah.
Teslyn
absolutely.
has so many layers.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
I fucking love that scene.
Yeah. Because, this note is saying, Elaine and Nynaeve are going to put themselves back into Elida's hands if they don't back off. And then when we switch to her POV, she's like, I think we should tell Elida everything right now. And it's like, what are you playing at, Teslyn?
Teslyn hates Elida and is sabotaging her.
But she also wants to look like she doesn't hate it. She wants to appear like a loyal Red, but also make it impossible for the loyalist of Reds to actually get Elida what she wants. And I like that about her. It makes sense that she's the one who ends up befriending Matt because she's actually practical and devious.
Yeah, Teslyn is one of my favorite minor characters.
In case we didn't make that clear, like, clearly Teslyn put this note in his pocket and she's being deceptive.
I mean, at this point we don't know who it was, but if we're reading through a first time, but yeah, we know it was Teslyn, and knowing that this whole next scene with her and Joline is just a masterful piece of manipulation and the game of houses, and so fun because honestly, Joline kind of sucks.
Ugh,
and
so much.
Teslyn has so much about her that's kind of likable in her own crusty way.
And this has so many consequences going forward in terms of, like, Matt rescuing Teslyn and Joline from the Seanchan and everything that happens in 2 books. A lot of Matt's storyline is dependent on this note, which, although doesn't actually make any difference for the girls, does make a big difference for his relationship with Teslyn and how they feel like they need to read each other.
And the Sea Folks' entire ability to fuck with Seanchan shit.
Also, by the way, how clever of it is Matt to realize it could have only been one of these 2 people, then go to Joline and figure out that it wasn't her and deduce that it was Teslyn.
Mm-hmm.
Very clever of him. That's Game of Houses, Matt, when he would never admit that he's getting good at it. He's getting really good at it.
For sure.
The apartments Joline shared with Teslyn were quite spacious, including a bedchamber for each of them, plus one apiece for their mates, and another that would have done quite well for Blarick and Fen if Teslyn could have stood to have her warders with them. The woman saw every man as a potentially rabid wolf, and there was no gainsaying her when she truly wanted something. As inexorable as Elida, she ground down whatever lay in her path. They stood as equals in every real way, certainly, but not many managed to prevail over Teslyn without a clear advantage. She was at the writing table in the sitting room when Joline entered, her pen making an awful scritch. She was always parsimonious with the ink.
I think that sets the stage of what's happening. Is Joline is wrong about Teslyn in every way and irritated at the wrong things, and it's just...
Or yeah, her opinions, because yeah, I believe that Teslyn absolutely is, without a doubt, someone who, pushes to prevail, but at the same time, because Joline does basically act like a child, and what she says after she tells her, I think Elida is right about you, which she totally puts out there because she's like, okay, I don't want to go back to Ebou Dar to Tar Valon, and Joline has kind of been making noises about going back, and she's like, I want to put a stop to this. I'm going to piss her off at Elida, and then I'm going to make it sound like I want to go back, because then she'll say she doesn't want to, because she's that easy to manipulate.
So you think that Teslyn doesn't want to go back, but she manipulates Joline to be the one arguing for that?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, because she says she wants to tell Elida things. She says she wants to go back, but then she lets Joline convince her otherwise.
Yeah, she 100%. She's like, I think Elida's right about you, and then tells her something that she knows will absolutely infuriate her, but tells her something that's also 100% true, which is basically that some people don't grow up from when they were kids, which my wife said was one of the hardest and most disappointing lessons that she ever learned growing up, was that not all adults behave like grown-ups. And she said that it was incredibly disenchanting to learn that and super frustrating.
Yeah, it is.
And a lot of those adults have children.
Why is it that the most annoying adults are the ones who are like the happiest to pop out lots of children, and the adults I really like are the ones who are like, doesn't seem like a good plan. It's like, the world's full of idiots. Make less idiots.
I mean, I don't think idiocracy is actually a thing that's happening, because I don't believe in genetically inferior people breeding.
There's culture.
There's a certain amount of education that aligns with people who are more educated tend to make the decision to have fewer children.
Yeah, and to have choices rather than just letting fate sweep them along. And it's yeah, I don't like to subscribe to the theory of eugenics because Nazis, but also America. FYI, in case you didn't know, we inspired the Nazis on that front. But yeah, the feedback loops in who chooses to procreate are frustrating to observe sometimes.
And a lot of it is, wrapped up in poverty as well, which is also frustrating. But
that's my big frustration with it, is the fact that, like, oh, we keep people in poverty, and then that leads to population booms, when it's really like education and finances. So, like, oh, if I want a few children to live into adulthood, I don't have to have 6 kids, because 3 of them are going to die, and one or two of them won't have kids. And so if I want, a generation to continue, I have to have lots of children. Like, that is a mindset that a lot of people are still stuck in.
Yeah, and then there's access to reproduction, like, information and resources.
Access to birth control. Like, if you're pro-life, you should definitely be pro-access to birth control, because reasons.
Yeah, and it's education around what birth control even means, and the fact that you have rights as a person with a uterus. You actually still have rights. Like, your ovaries don't actually make you inferior and rightsless. It's this is not the right moment for this soapbox.
My
gonads don't make me inferior, but I don't know about yours.
Well, no, when you cross your legs over your dick, it's like... So...
No, I was absolutely laughing about crossing my legs over my dick, yeah. I was like, I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to cross my legs over my dick, because that's when you know I'm serious, right? When I really... All right, Scout. I'm going to cross my legs over my dick and give you some friendly advice from one man to another.
Going back to the idea of Teslyn manipulating Joline, Keith makes a great point that Joline just said in her first paragraph that Teslyn always gets her way, so Teslyn giving up on the fight is a tell, and I think that is a great point.
That's absolutely Jordan pointing that out. Yeah.
Agreed. I never saw that before, but I agree so strongly. Like, Teslyn's playing so many levels of chess, and Joline is just like a toddler. It's like playing checkers.
Which really makes me think that maybe she hasn't grown up, even though she's older. Maybe she really is the child.
Oh, she has not grown up. Yeah. She's 13 at best. Like,
Elida is being perceptive in this case when she's calling her a child.
Yeah. Rare for Elida, but it happens. A wrong clock is right every now and then, so...
Yeah, I mean, well, Elida pre-Padden Fane is kind of a perceptive dick. Still a dick, but perceptive.
She's got a good head for politics, yeah.
Teslyn makes a great point. It's like, okay, you're upset at Mirilil, but hello... going off on it because you're upset at something that happened when you were a novice, and it's like you've got this built-up thing. It's like, yeah, that's childish. And for Teslyn, she's thinking, you're Aes Sedai, and you pull this bullshit off. And even Mistress Ainen later on in dealing with Joline, it's like, how'd you even pass your test for the shawl?
I love
this is
that dress down.
Bullshit. And it's true. It's like there are so many Aes Sedai that manage to pass their test for the shawl, and you sometimes wonder, because other Aes Sedai get to pick what they see when they go through their ter'angreal or what they fight, whether the test is rigged for people who are...
Absolutely the test is rigged. Are you kidding me? There's talking about the kin, man, the people who get fail their tests and get kicked out. It's a popularity contest. The whole thing, Nynaeve wasn't supposed to pass because, like, she passed despite what the other Aes Sedai did to her. Like, I absolutely believe that there is some serious confirmation bias. Also, it's the way the Dark Friends are able to weed some people out.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a great way to figure out who should be in charge of the world. It's just really, really flawed. But yeah, the fact that Joline has held on to this grudge for so many decades that she will just impulsively change their like long-term strategy just to dress down another Aes Sedai is like, wow, you need impulse control. Such a child. And then it's like, she gets mad and she's like, it's Teslyn's fault that I'm mad. And it's like, oh, take some responsibility, woman. How many centuries have you lived? She's not a young Aes Sedai. She says that like she had the shawl when Elida was born. It's like, you have had time to grow up and you have taken zero advantage of it.
She's 101 years old.
And she acts like she's 10.
Yeah, she's outraged because Elida's mother was a child when she got the shawl. So to be called that is so outraging. And it's like, no, you deserve it because you have no impulse control and you let your emotions weigh your actions.
Also, don't Amerlin Seat call all Aes Sedai child? Isn't that just like, doesn't Egwene call it?
It's supposed to be daughter.
Oh, okay.
And there's a difference
it's
between a child and capital C child. So
yeah.
But still, Teslyn's like, yeah, Aes Sedai teachers are harsh. That's what we do. Get over it.
And it's like, one of the things that I love about the little bits of characterization here, because yeah, you're seeing an unreliable narrator, and Joline is not fond of Teslyn. She's pissed about her warders and everything, but it's just sort of like the little bits of letting you know that she was actually a good teacher and seems to have enjoyed teaching, which is like, because all of the Aes Sedai, for the most part, are forced to teach. Like, all of the accepted have to teach, and then some of them obviously enjoy doing it. But it seems like you hear about Aes Sedai that don't like doing it, but are forced to do it anyway by their heads of their Ajas. And I figured that's probably because it's like, you may not want to teach a white sister, but you need to get out there because we want recruits to our Aja. So, get out there, teach novices, teach accepted, and do your duty for the Aja so we don't fade away. And then you get natural teachers who, even though they're assholes, are actually good at it or enjoy it.
It reminds me a lot of a university setting.
I was going to say that too.
Yeah. Research, right? You have to do research, but like, you're technically supposed to be a teacher, and so you get these people who may be very good at research, but are just assholes when it comes to teaching, or not very good at it. But then the reverse happens, where you get people who are actually good teachers, and they're not respected because they don't do the research the way they're supposed to. There's this trade-off that happens, especially with these Aes Sedai, where like, being a good teacher of novices isn't necessarily considered a valuable trait. And so, yeah, you end up with a lot of asshole teachers.
And Keith's bringing something up in chat that I wanted to ask about. I don't think that Teslyn actually would mind the warders being around. She doesn't seem to have a hard time getting used to like Matt or anything. Like, the concept that she like gets hives around men is like, that's a green Aja bias, and maybe Teslyn doesn't want the warders around because of the effect it will have on Joline, but I don't think it's because she like actually doesn't want to be around men per se.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. There's something to, a safe space where it's just comfortable. They have the way that the rooms are described, where they have the main room and then the bedrooms off. I can see where Teslyn wanting a place for just women to be, because there is there are just places where it's comfortable to have it be all girls, because I don't know, I went to a women's college, and there's a difference to having an all-women environment. And so if I can see Teslyn feeling less comfortable with the warders there, not necessarily because she dislikes men, just because she feels like she doesn't, there's not that safe sense. There's just this different sense of energy. But I also agree that if she can get her way with that and say, I don't want your warders around, then what else can she get away with? And the more that she gets her way and is able to kind of dominate Joline, the better. So
yeah, it also may be that Joline is making a bigger deal out of it than it is. Like, Teslyn just wanted some space, and Joline's like, oh, it's because Reds hate men. Like, such a drama queen. But yeah, no, you're right. It would be weird for them to have, like, Aes Sedai and their maids and then 2 random men. Like, in the tower, warders are not right in the apartments, generally. And as Frosted Angel in the Sky is saying, if Joline's warders are anything like her, also you can see why Teslyn might not be interested in having them around.
because, just empathizing with Teslyn and imagining the situation and sticking those 2 dudes in the situation, even perfectly respectful men, there's automatically this shift of a sense of comfort, and which is not necessarily their fault. There's just, I don't know, it's like a safer space.
Yeah, for sure.
RJ does those little tiny bits of points of view. I don't know if we ever get a POV from Teslyn, which is a shame if not, because her being characterized from other people's perspectives, she gets judged a lot for the way her face looks, because she has kind of a
serious RBF.
She has hardcore resting bitch face. Joline mentions that she scowls, or maybe that's just her face. and so a lot of things get put on her that, totally might not be there. And I feel like she was a great character to do that kind of contrast where you see her from everybody's eyes and then you get in her head and she's not like how everybody else thinks. Because he does that really well with a lot of characters.
Yeah, I don't think we ever get a POV from her, but we do get a lot of intense looks at her from people who we do get in their heads a lot. So, like, from all those different angles, you get a more rounded picture of Teslyn. Especially her whole thing in the circus and how she, comes to grow on Matt and all that. I think that we get closer to being inside her head, but we never actually get into it.
Well, I also think RJ makes Joline so insufferably obnoxious so that we'll like Teslyn.
Mm-hmm.
This wonderful juxtaposition, because it's like it's almost impossible to like Joline. She is a child. She acts like a child. She's entitled. She's a shithead, and so it's like, of course you like Teslyn better because Teslyn's contained and takes responsibility for her emotions and does not act nearly as entitled despite being Aes Sedai. Also, in the end, is 100% willing to throw Elida under the bus because she was done dirty, and she's like, you know what, I was done dirty, and I'm not going to take the fact that she was Red Aja or she was the Amaryllis seat or any of it to excuse her bad behavior. Fuck her, I will do whatever.
For sure. We get a
favor for favor.
Yeah. We get another piece of how much of a child Joline is because she's still obsessed with the sensation of channeling. She has no impulse control. She's like, I will use the power to do every little thing, and I've never lost my exhilaration about it and all this stuff. And it's like, on the one hand, I get it because the power is like amazing, but on the other hand, it really digs in that characterization of her as just being so childish she can't even like walk across the room to get a goblet. She has to touch the power to do it.
Doing it from the point of view of someone who's the person being manipulated it's unusual. Usually when he does that, he's showing it to you from the eyes of the person who's, being the diabolical manipulator, and you're hearing in their mind the things that they're doing in order to get their way. So instead, to get this, to have it set up with the letter, and then to get this scene, and then to get the payout so much later is kind of cool. It's one of those things like, this is why you reread, for just tiny little bits like this.
Yeah.
This is peak Jordan, to be like, this scene doesn't make sense until you figure out that it's Teslyn who left the note. And then you get to read that with a whole nother view and a whole nother angle on what's actually going on here.
Yeah. I mean, I always believed the narrative as written. I was wrong to do that.
As Jordan appears to teach us over and over and over
do
again.
I learn?
Don't believe
No.
what's on the page. No, only human. Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing how much Teslyn is arguing for the opposite of what her note is intending. But while saying the truth, I mean, she's not a black sister. Like, she doesn't have the ability to lie. She just has the ability to turn truth on its head. It's amazing.
I also love that Teslyn and Bail Domon have the same speech patterns.
Yes,
I suppose there do be no urgency. Like, that, it makes her sound a little bit like a pirate to me.
And then you want to trust her, because it's like, well, she talks like Domon, and then he's cool.
I always want to imagine like a thick Scottish brogue by their aged grandmothers.
Yes.
By their aged grandmother.
He says that, like, now she is the aged grandmother, but, you know.
Joline's both the aged grandmother and the immature child.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, Teslyn's older than Joline, too, because she taught Joline.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, the Golden Girls comes to mind. I just think of, like, Teslyn as... Gosh, I don't remember any of their names, but the oldest of the four.
Sophia. Joline is Blanche.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
I'm going to read these first 2 short paragraphs, because they're good. The woman on the table arched up as far as her bonds would allow, eyes bulging, throat corded with a piercing scream that went on and on. Abruptly, the scream was a loud, choking rasp instead, and she convulsed, shaking from wrist to ankles, then collapsed in silence. Wide-open eyes stared sightlessly at the cobwebbed basement ceiling. Giving vent to curses was irrational, but Falion could have turned the air as blue as any stableman. Not for the first time she wished she had Tamael here instead of Ispan. Questions were answered eagerly for Tamael, and nobody died until she was ready. Of course, Tamael enjoyed the work entirely too much, but that was beside the point.
Oh, Tamila, you torturous bitch.
Yeah, she would be another Semirog if given appropriate room to grow. She would become like Semirog.
Small note about Tamila Kinderode.
Uh-huh.
Her last name always reminded me of Kinderholm from Dragonlance, which I don't know if either of you have read, but like, yeah, the Kinder, mischievous, fun people, and Tamila is not.
No, she's mischievous. She has fun.
Yeah, she has fun. No one has fun with her.
No.
Which, in fairness, the Kinder are quite annoying, so I guess there is that. Anyway.
But I just love giving vent to curses is irrational, but I'm doing it anyway.
Typical white. That's irrational. But, you know, people are irrational, so yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like a lot of the whites' logic is too caught up in like the kind of logic that is, book-related logic or basic, structured philosophies, rather than the kind of logic that's rooted in common sense. Because if letting out curses releases some of the stress, then it is 100% rational to curse, And I feel like, my personal opinion is, if I were running the White Aja, I would spend a lot of time with new sisters, training them in things like mindfulness and, philosophies designed to increase self-awareness, as well as, more book-oriented learning, because, otherwise it's kind of like, what's the point? Your logic isn't great if you're just thinking about other people's logic.
There are the worst sort of reductionist logicians. They're just like, the real world is inferior to what I think reality is. And it's like, oh, you are not the center of the world, White Aja.
It's just so bad with the motivated reasoning.
Yeah. But basically this scene is opening into like the end of like a badly performed exorcism, almost. It's kind of how it always reads to me. Because they're torturing with the power without really knowing how to torture properly. They don't really know what they're doing. And
it's like the opposite of the Semirog, where Semirog, like, she kills a warder out of distraction, but sort of the same thing, where it's like, that's just her being distracted, whereas here they just don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, they're doing what the White Cloaks do, but with the power, instead of with actual, like, she's like, oh, yeah, actually cutting them and burning them would be so messy. But, like, they're doing the same sort of brute force approach with the power. Because they don't know how the human body works, barely, right? I mean, they don't even have a yellow in the room. Tamila's a yellow, I bet.
No, Tamila's a gray.
I guess non-healers can also be sadists. What a concept.
Yeah, they say that she's such an effective negotiator because she spreads the pain evenly.
Oh, right.
She likes to spread pain.
Right, yeah. But yeah, they're torturing a wise woman, a red-belted member of the kin, in an effort to figure out where this cache is. And for whatever reason, she doesn't tell them. I'm not quite sure why, because I assume that all the kin know where it is.
Yeah, I don't know if they all know where it is or not.
Oh, maybe only the knitting circle knows. That would make more sense, actually.
Her body is found, and they definitely realize that she is killed with the power.
Right, because they cut her throat after she's dead, and even the two thugs are like, you know, it's not going to look like, and she, throws one against the wall. Like,
I think also Arnon is like, no one will believe because she's a wise woman, and no one's going to believe that someone cut the throat of a wise woman.
Right, because no one would.
Right, the red
'cause
belt
never-
is it's an immunity pass to that sort of thing.
I went back and looked at like the epilogue of Lord of Chaos to kind of, because Falion is one of the last POVs, so it's like it's been a month, and so a month ago she's telling herself there's no cash, and she's debating about whether she should torture a wise woman. Like that's like her next step, should she do that? And so yeah, now she's gotten to that point, and then oops, because she sucks at it, and she's worrying like, has Moghedien lost us or ever, or forgotten about us? And I think what's happening, Moghedien was captured by Egwene and Elaine and Nynaeve had her, and I think at this point in time now Moghedien must be in the vacuole.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's been rescued from Saladar but has not yet been subjugated to Moradin.
We saw that was the night of Dumai's Wells. After Dumai's Wells, she was actually rescued that night.
Right.
And then that's been a couple of days.
And then she's gonna get out in a day or two because that's when she's gonna balefire Nynaeve's boat.
Yeah, but yeah, and it's not that Moghedien forgot you; it's that Moghedien is otherwise occupied.
Moghedien's got a collar around her neck.
Moghedien's not doing so great. And back at the end of Lord of Chaos, Falion is also thinking to herself, well, we can't find the cash. I don't think it's here, but Elaine and Nynaeve are here. And Ispan is telling her we should stay as fucking far away from them as possible. They ruin everything. And Falion's like, no, that's not reasonable to fear that. Moghedien wants them. Maybe we should take them. And so she's now back to that as well here. It's kind of interesting that he syncs all of that up. But I also love hearing her just hate on Ispan and also just the kind of characterization of different types of Black Sisters, that you have one that has to like hide in the corner behind a ward because they can't handle watching anybody be tortured.
They can handle the torture in principle, just not in their face. I love how Falion approaches all of this, but yeah, Ispan. And Ispan, as we will remember, dies with Adelius.
Mm-hmm.
She gets stabbed through the heart after being paralyzed because she's been captured and is not really giving up information, but she was captured, and that's reason enough to be killed.
I mean, after Moghedien's thing, I can see why the Dark is like, nope, everyone who gets captured, you just go down. We're not willing to give over any more information. Like,
Yeah. We also saw the sisters get murdered in the Stone of Tyr by Slayer. So they don't take failure well. But yeah, I mean, Moghedien is a great example of why you should be very harsh, because information might get out. Don't take that risk.
By all evidence, they schemed and fought as hard as 2 Mirandians with one blanket. Is it really cold in Mirandy? Like, what are they talking about?
It's because
there?
Mirandians pride themselves on being short-tempered.
I'm guessing it gets pretty cold there. It's center of the continent.
Yeah, and it borders Andor, so there's snow. Yeah, but it's mostly, I think, about the fact that Mirandians are extremely short-tempered. I mean, they're a country that barely has a leader because they're so contentious. And she's quite correct. They definitely all are squabbling as hard as 2 Mirandians with one blanket. Like, she is very correct in her deduction that the Forsaken are not working together in any real way.
And yeah, I love Falion's logic of being able to come up with that, but also kind of being like, but what are we supposed to do about that? Because we still have to obey them, so thinking, well, if we can net this prize of getting Elaine and Nynaeve, and I'm wondering if that's why Elaine ends up getting offered like the poison drink. She gets hit in the head as they're coming back from the can, but with a rock or something in the street, and it's just like everybody's trying to be kidnapped, So Falion is trying to kidnap the girls, and Lady Shienne's trying to kidnap Matt, and there's just this massive, drive to kidnap people. And
yeah, I never quite understood who triggered that, but yeah, you're right. It's probably these two. Well, the gang.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, getting shanghaied. That's seems to be a theme, definitely. A trap getting into, as we call it.
And her reasoning about who to pick is interesting, because it's almost like she doesn't know about the kin, but she's almost worked it out just through deduction, which is impressive.
Yeah, but she assumes that they're all wilders when the fact of the...
I was going to say, that has a lot to do with the prejudice that she's giving into, is that she doesn't think wilders can have any valuable information. So, like, as much as I do think that Callie did a decent job of hiding her secrets, and may not have even known, because only the circle did, I think that there's some prejudice there among...
Well, that's why they picked Callie,
friend.
Was because she wasn't a wilder. That's the whole reason that she was targeted, was because she was put out of the tower. Because they're like, well, let's not even bother with the wilders. That's useless. But women who are put out of the tower don't have the same inhibitions on holding on to ter'angreal. And Callie had been found to try to take like an art ter'angreal out of the tower, a useless thing that makes images of flowers and the sound of a waterfall.
But also, if Callie was only put out 4 years ago, that means she's one of the youngest. And since we know that the Wise Ones base seniority on age, she would have some of the least knowledge, least information. Like, they are going after those who they think are higher up, but they're doing it on an Aes Sedai scale, and what they're actually encountering is a bunch of really low-ranking wise women, because they have no way to find, because they can't track the eldest of the wise women who left
hundreds of years ago,
hundreds and hundreds of years ago, so they have no way of tracking them down. So their leads are only the most recently expelled Aes Sedai, which are the low men on the totem pole on the wise ones hierarchy.
Yeah. It's technically a flawed metaphor. That's not how totem poles work, but the lowest position is actually the highest rank. So corporate ladder would be a more correct analogy.
So low man on the totem pole is simply a nonsensical statement.
And racist. But yeah, it's not how totem pole symbology works. So
Didn't know that.
Yeah. Because the person at the bottom is holding everyone else up.
Oh.
The native cultures that I've read about around here, that's the most honored position, is the person who can support everybody else. And the people at the top are the least honorable because they need everyone below them to hold them up.
In our culture, we call those essential workers.
So, the corporate ladder is, just kick people in the face on your way up, and you're doing a good job.
The next we see of Falion, I think, is in Andor, so I'm guessing... Or no, we see her at the end of this book, but she must get out right as
away.
The Shanshan. She gets away, Ispan gets captured, and then we see her again in Andor, so she must get right out and flee the city just before the Shanshan.
Yeah, we see her with Millie Skane. She gets sent to Millie Skane, but I think that's when we see her next, is being assigned as a servant to a non-channeler. The horror.
But isn't that all in Ebou Dar?
No, it's all
that's
with
in
Melar and all that stuff.
Oh, okay.
Remember?
I always assumed that continued in Ebou Dar, but
no.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's in Camelin. Okay.
So presumably right after everything goes down in the Rahad and they grab the bull, Falion, Millie Skane, Jacob Carradine, all of them grab all of their shit and leave, because the next day is the day that the city falls to the Shanshan.
And they probably all know to get out because they're Shanshan dark friends or something. Or they're just slippery rats.
Or they just got their asses kicked. Yeah.
Cockroaches.
Interesting. I never considered what happened to them after.
Neither did I.
But yeah, there's that scene where Nynaeve is, shrieking down the stairs and don't let that one get away, because they capture Ispan, Falion gets away, and then we don't see her. We don't see her again until Melar and Millie in Camelin.
And Carradine as well.
Oh yeah,
they're all together.
Oh, she's strapped to the table with Carradine.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot that's
Carradine.
Falion.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, it is Falion, right? Millie doesn't kill both the people on the table. She only kills Carradine. Yeah.
They let Falion live.
She uses Carradine as a way of ensuring Falion's loyalty forevermore.
Right, because you want to convince the channeler not to betray you, because they have a lot of power.
Right, and having someone drown in front of you in brandy while you're both strapped to the same table is a powerful lesson.
And yeah, it's like Moradin comes back, because at that point Samael is no longer giving Carradine any kind of orders. So, and the cache has been found.
I like what the plummet says.
Gives it a stiff drink.
A stiff drink. Coming from the innkeeper, too. I like that. How stiff do you make your drinks? Stiff enough
How many
to drown
stiffs
you
do you
in a
make with
barrel
your
of
drinks?
What's the stiff to drink ratio? That's the question.
But yeah, it's so funny how they're like, you know what? Nynaeve, Almir, and Elaine Drakand are terrible for our plans. Do not go near them. Avoid, avoid, avoid. It amuses me.
I love the reference here to Leandrin, who was left with basically a perma block.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that Asmodean was, right? Asmodean's was supposed to fade with time. Leandrin's was basically like sealed off all the way. Asmodean's had a small hole in it and supposedly faded with time, even though, I mean, he was only around for like 6 weeks, we figured out, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
they wouldn't have had time to fade with time. There was no time
Yeah.
to fade with time.
But yeah, the one that Moghedien ties is meant to be permanent.
I'm guessing she adds more layers to it, and there's no hole in the middle and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
She ties one of those knots that will never come undone.
Right. It's like, you're not stilled, but you're kind of stilled.
Yeah.
Might as well be.
I mean, it's one of those things where if someone knew how to cut flows, it feels like it wouldn't be that hard to cut those flows if they knew where they were and they knew how to cut them.
She's got like invisible tape for the power.
Exactly. Right.
Logic must prevail over emotion. No, it mustn't.
Well, I mean, yes, but, logic can work through emotion. I don't know. As speaking as someone who's got, a lot of crazy emotions, I try to use my logic to control them, but it's logical to be afraid. I feel like Ispan's logic is quite sound in the fact that, yeah, they show up and then everything goes to shit, and staying away from them is wise.
In a world where there's literally Ta'veren, and you're living with them, like, you have to admit coincidence is a thing. And you have to be like, yeah, maybe the fact that they show up and cause craziness has something to do with the Dragon Reborn, and maybe we should be careful with that. Like, that is absolutely a logical thing to think in this world of magic and coincidence and odds being weird and bubbles of evil and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of like, it's logical to be fearful, and her fears are logical. And so, yeah, Falion, in the short POVs that we get from her, we see that her capacity for logic is honestly really flawed. And it's flawed based upon her self-delusions, because she's not very self-aware. And yeah, what do you call that? The motivated reasoning. I had to write that down. But yeah, by how she wants things to be, which is the failing of all Aes Sedai, but at least the White Aja should not have that failing, and it's disappointing.
But that's the thing, is like, they shouldn't have it, and they have more than any of the other Ajas, because they won't admit that they have it, right? So they fall. This is the whole thing. Every Aja fails at what they're supposed to be best at, right?
Yeah.
The Battle Aja is like the worst at fighting. Mm-hmm. The Red Aja sets up false dragons. My headcanon is they do that, even though Sulan made it up. I think she was right.
Yeah.
Don't at me. The Blue Aja is supposed to deal with causes, but they end up undermining them half the time. The Yellow Aja is supposed to be healing, but what the fuck? Who are they healing? Like, they don't have any healing stations set up. All that. Like, same thing with the Light. They're supposed to be the most logical and the least motivated by emotion, and I think they're the most motivated by emotion.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that they are, I always say that it's an Aja that requires minimal effort, and there's truth to that, because and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but you should at least go through the effort of being able to separate out your emotions and make logical choices, and set your feelings aside. And I feel like the yellow Aja, the white Aja is, failing miserably on that. And I suspect they're going to get rid of it for the show.
You're going to have
I hope
less
not.
than...
I hope they have all 7.
Oh, man. Taking away an Aja, that'd be rough.
Yeah, no, you can't take away an Aja. Like,
they could take away all the characters from the Aja.
There's 3 people here, and 2 of us are white, so, like, there's no way they can take that away. Like, come on. Like, this... Well, actually, Morgan, do you consider yourself white?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Yeah, me too. I think it's one of the reasons I like your content so much.
Because I'm always like, this is reasonable and this is logical, and I probably... Those are the words I use the most.
And it absolutely like, oh, that fits a hole in my brain. The logic works really well.
Well, I feel like for people who have, I have incredibly powerful emotions. I have, a mental illness, meaning I have broken feelings. And so it's sort of like, because I know that emotions are treacherous and untrustworthy things, you have to step back from them and not let them dictate the choices that you make. And so, yeah, it's like, what is logical? What is reasonable? And if you're feeling super emotional, you need to step back and be like, is this reasonable? Is this fair?
It's how I manage my anxiety, is you have to think about it logically. That's the only way to deal with it.
My logic just makes me more anxious. That's why I go study things to soothe my anxiety, and that's why I'm a brown.
We love to use logic to justify our crazy.
You guys are so white. Yeah, I just wish it had a different name. I feel like it's too politically charged.
There is that, it's really hard to be like, I'm white!
Yeah.
You have to be like
it's okay to be white. No. Don't say that. Don't say that.
No, that's not what I'm trying to say. No.
Yeah.
White No. Damn it.
I'm gonna be like,
it's rough.
We're the cream colored Aja, and I get the
right.
white is
The alabaster Aja.
Heath is like the smallest Aja, so persecuted.
Right,
Yeah.
No, you have to be really careful when you're like, because out of context, being like, man, I love the
I'm
white.
such a white.
I'm white. Yeah, I'm so white.
That's one of the reasons why I think they'll probably get rid of it for the show, and also just because they won't find the need to have to put in these people deal with logic, and it's just sort of like, what purpose is there for showing that to people? So.
But I can't imagine them changing the 7 colors. How do you change the 7 Ajas and the stole? And like, it's such an iconic thing.
I mean, Elida did.
You comparing Rafe to Elida?
Right. That's the words out of my mouth. That was the next sentence I was going to say. Is how dare you compare Rafe to Elida? That's just wrong.
I feel like that's unfair. Yeah, or maybe they will have to pick a different color for it. And I get why he picked white. White is the color of asceticism and other words that I can't think off the top of my head because, I'm only a pseudo-intellectual. But like, the reason that, J.K. Rowling, fuck you, J.K. Rowling, picked the word albus for Dumbledore's because it has a root in the word white, and it's like, so white is for, not feelings, thinking logically, and it's just sort of like, so there's purpose to that when you're not looking at it in a politically charged way, but it's just...
I mean, if you really want to avoid the white Aja, I'd go with orange, would be my alternative color.
Oh god, does it have to be orange?
I mean, you can't do purple.
No.
And then you're out of the primes. Then where are you going? Magenta? I'm going
magenta's pretty great.
Not very logical.
Yeah, but that's just red.
Yeah.
Fuchsia.
Okay. Fuchsia Aja. Burnt orange.
So purple's the other alternative, but purple has other connotations. I don't want to go with the purple Aja.
Because that's not purple Zul, because Varen is purple. Black and brown makes purple. The turquoise Aja.
That could be cool. I mean,
the clear Aja.
We want to talk about like weird politically charged ways of saying things. Black sisters are bad.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, no, there's
I'm wondering if they're going to call it the dark Aja instead.
Yeah, because the number of times that I have to always say black Aja because otherwise it's just black sister, and I listen to too many black people talk for that sentence to roll off my tongue comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, the black really suck, right? Like, oh, yeah, like, it's really...
Yeah, it's...
There is a certain... one of the things I really like about the white Aja is that they're not necessarily the good Aja.
Right, yeah.
And I like that they don't make the white versus the black. Like, there isn't that sort of white versus black.
Yeah, you've got the white tower,
that
but that goes back to the, like, yin yang sans dots thing, and it's like, okay.
That's more male-female thing.
Oh, Frosted Angel in the Sky says Shadow Aja would be much less cringe.
Shadow Aja's good.
I like that. That would be good.
You guys talk this out. I'm going to run take a quick stop, and then we should come back and talk about Jane Farstrider.
Yes, we should.
I'm going to read that whole thing.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. But I mean, at some point, there's only so many colors to work with in the world. You're going to have awkward overlaps. So, Jane Farstrider as a very nice long readout where fun stuff happens and he doesn't get named, but we know it's Noel.
We know It's Noel, Jane, Far, Strider,
Charm.
Charn, whatever you want to call him. He's got two first names and 2 last names.
And however many alibis.
Sitting on an upended barrel, which he does a lot, in the sparse coolness of a narrow, shaded alley, he studied the house across the busy street. Suddenly, he realized he was touching his head again. He did not have a headache, but his head felt peculiar. Sometimes. Most often when he thought about what he could not remember. 3 stories of white plaster. The house belonged to a goldsmith who supposedly was being visited by 2 friends she had met on a journey north some years ago. The friends had only been glimpsed on arrival and not seen since. Finding that out had been easy. Finding out they were Aes Sedai, only a trifle more difficult. A lean young man in a torn vest, whistling his way down the street with no good on his mind, paused when he glimpsed him sitting on a barrel. His coat, and his location in the shadows, and the rest of him, he admitted ruefully, probably looked tempting. He reached under his coat. His hands no longer possessed the strength or flexibility for sword work, but the 2 long knives he carried for well over 30 years had surprised more than one swordsman. Maybe something showed in his eyes, because the lean young man thought better of it and whistled his way on. Beside the house, the gate that led back to the goldsmith's stable swung open, and 2 burly men appeared pushing a barrow piled high with soiled straw and muck. What were they up to? Aaron and Nad were hardly the lads to be mucking out stables. He would stay there until dark, he decided, and then see whether he could find Caridin's pretty little killer again. Once again, he pulled his hand down from his head. Sooner or later, he would remember. He did not have much time left, but it was all he did have. He remembered that much.
Cryptic.
What's he doing there? Why is he doing things there? What is his motivation?
That is such a hard POV to figure out, especially first-time readers. It's like, what the fuck? I have no idea. But this is Noel breaking away from his compulsion.
So, does Grendel send him to Ebou Dar?
That seems to be, she sent him there to spy on Millie Skane and perhaps a few of the other Dark Friends to keep them in order and report back to her. Why he doesn't, I do not know, other than perhaps he is breaking away from his compulsion.
Because didn't she say something about, or someone says something about how he thinks he's free, but he's not? So
That's, Shamael says that.
I guess that's after the whole Malkier thing. It's not necessarily after Grandal.
Oh, which book is it that one of the Forsaken comments on seeing the old man among all of Grendel's pretty people?
Lord of Chaos?
Because
I want to say Fires of Heaven.
Okay. Because I didn't ever pick up on that and ever pick up on... I had to be told outside of the story by other people. Okay, Fires of Heaven prologue, Zul says, that Jane Farstrider was even like a tool of Grendel's. Does it ever really tell you in the story?
No, that's entirely an assumption made on seeing an old man in Grendal's possession.
Okay.
And like just that we get that comment about Jane Farstrider a couple of different times, that he's an old man on a barrel, he's an old crooked, like just these repeated references to an old man. Why would she keep him around? Like that seems to be the only reason that anyone could come up with, is that he's famous because he's had this book written about him, so she would keep him around.
But do you really think that she sent him after Millie Skane of all people? Like, does Grandal even know that Millie exists? Like, why would Grendel send him to Ebou Dar?
To Ebou Dar, yeah.
I think she sent him after the cash, probably.
Oh.
It does seem to be the great Forsaken competition right now, is we want Angreal. Like, we've woken up, we've examined this world, and now we're looking for Angreal. And we've all, like, even Semael says, I've traced them, I followed them, like, they need to be here. Like, it seems like a lot of the Forsaken have traced various objects of power to Ebou Dar and are looking for this cache.
Yeah, because he's had a conversation... Samael has had a conversation with Grendel at this point. Like, she's come to his palace, and he's got air conditioning, and, so she finds out that he found a good cache of stuff, and he's talking about looking for the cache in Ebou Dar, I'm pretty sure. So I'm wondering, and this just occurred to me, did she send Jane just to track or follow all of the other Forsaken's minions to see if he could find the cache by following them?
You know what? I like this because then it might explain why the compulsion is fading off of him. She might have had to leave him with more agency and creativity because it was such an open-ended mission. And so she couldn't tell him, do exactly this. She had to be like, here's a general motivation. Now go use your own organic creativity to execute that mission. And that allows him to start finding his own way because obviously he's a very strong-willed person, much like Nynaeve, you know.
Do you think perhaps he initially joins Matt in order to betray him and is only later able to overcome that compulsion?
He joins real quick.
I don't know. He met Matt before because he's the one who tells Matt that Carradine is the one who owns the palace. Matt watches Sheen walk into the palace and get greeted and is like, okay, they know her. And he's like, but who the fuck lives there?
Yeah.
And then Noel is like, it's Jacob Carradine's palace. And Matt looks at him and he's like, I recognize him. He was standing next to Sheen at the Silver Circuit at the racetrack. And I went into Winter's Heart at the scene where Noel rescues Matt from the Golem. And all Matt says is that the guy looks familiar. So it's like he recognizes him, quote unquote, but I would guess that Noel most certainly recognizes Matt.
Well, and he's been following Sheen for a while now.
Yeah. I don't think that he joins Matt to betray him, but I do think that he joins Matt for ulterior motives that change in response to being around Matt. Like he knows that Millie Skane doesn't like Matt and he wants to find out what that's about or something like that. He's got some other motive that then, because Matt's Ta'Viren or something, he's able to shift allegiance.
Well, also, all of the people that he was basically supposed to follow to the cache left the city before it fell to the Shanshan. So at that point, he's kind of wandering around without a mission. Maybe easy to just quickly be hooked by a Ta'Viren.
And maybe one of the reasons why he was able to escape some of the compulsion is Grendel didn't want to walk into Shanshan territory, and so she wasn't able to re-up her compulsion.
Right.
And so he had longer than usual, like he wasn't really able to report back because of the whole Shanshan invasion, and so he was able to fight off this compulsion. Like, the last line of this chapter is, you know, sooner or later he would remember. He did not have much time left. And I'm thinking maybe that's the time left until Grendel checks in with him.
Oh, I was assuming until he died, but yeah, maybe.
That was my first thought, but with this conversation, it's like maybe he didn't have much time until Grendel's coming back for him to re-up his compulsion. And he has some time. He's like sort of slowly breaking free.
Oh, that's fascinating. So kind of like a Kilgrave kind of thing.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh.
There's a ticking time clock, and like he knows he has X amount of time, and like, oh, I know she's going to re-up my compulsion, and I managed to break free early enough, and I'm slowly remembering who I am.
And then the Shanshan give him the opportunity to break away, and then Matt gives him an exit strategy.
Yeah, because Grendel isn't about to go where the Shanshan are.
No, especially not for such a low-grade pawn. I mean, he's not really important.
Especially because the cache has now been found and is gone, so the people he was tracking are gone, and the mission that she was having them track for is gone.
So the compulsion has less force.
Yeah, and he's got powerful motivations in his own self, you know, to clear his name, to atone for abandoning his wife. I very much think of him as like Nynaeve in terms of like or Margaze, you know, like some people's minds just resist. Farstrider is one of those people. And then Matt, you know, Ta'Viren gives a strong pull.
And Super Sky makes a good point that maybe the order is follow the Dark Friends in Ebou Dar, right? But if they're not in Ebou Dar, then what do? Right? There's no Dark Friends that he knows about anymore left in Ebou Dar, so the orders don't apply anymore.
Does not compute.
And yeah, I mean, in that way that you know, computers only do exactly what they tell you to, compulsion kind of works that way, where it's like they only can find the motivated reasoning to do exactly what you tell them to do. They have to find that reasoning within themselves.
Yeah, Varen's thing is you have to come up with a reason, but she's piecing it together. It's not the same as Grendel's motivation.
That's true, but I imagine like a Grendel-like compulsion is like, because the same way that Morgaze, like, she believes she's in love with Robbie.
Right, yeah.
Even though she's not, but she believes that she is. And that's the motivation behind all the, like, why do I continually fall for this guy? Like, I must love him so much. And it's like, no, you're just compelled.
But yeah, Grandal just sends Jane out there with a fairly vague open-ended mission and then loses contact with him and doesn't care to retrieve him. So Matt is able to pick him up in a Taviran swirl, and then his own inherent stubbornness allows him to actually do something really fucking badass with his life.
And in the meantime, Grendel kind of locks herself into this bargain with Samael, and she has bigger problems to deal with, at least for the course of the book, until Samael ends up getting, eaten by Mashadar, and then she doesn't know what happened to him.
And she's desperate for Angreal.
Mm-hmm. She does get one eventually. I don't remember where she gets it from.
Isn't the little gold ring that she gets? Yeah.
I think she finds it in Samael's stuff, actually.
Yeah.
Right.
She's like, I scored 1! Yes!
Well, because my assumption is that Samael actually gets some of the stuff from the cache, right?
Yeah,
because
he does.
He definitely does, right? Like, and that's where...
And that's a complete grab bag, so it's not sorted to male only.
But that would explain why she's able to find it in his stuff, is like he recovered a bunch of stuff from this and then went off to fight Rand. I guess he didn't get any Angreal for himself in this battle? In this?
No, he must have not, or not had time to find any that were there.
I don't know. I think that there probably is at least a little bit of time between when they have the thing that happens in the Rahad and Rand goes to Ilion, but probably not more than a couple of days. I'm not sure, though.
The way he attacks Rand with the sort of lightning going forward, like, those are powerful attacks, and he's got the whole city warded, and, like, he very well could have Angreal during that battle. Like, we're not absolutely sure that he pretty much overpowers Rand. No problem.
Yeah,
it's not
true.
Until
Rand does not win on
Mashadar
strength.
catches him.
So
No, he doesn't.
yeah, fascinating.
He's going to catch him unaware with Balefire, but misses because Mashadar and Leah.
Oh, thanks, Morgan, for joining us for
Yeah,
this
Morgan,
chapter.
thank
This
you.
was really
Yeah,
fun.
that was
We
wonderful.
wandered all over the place. We had
I like these little smaller chapters where there's not a ton of stuff going on plot-wise, or not major stuff, but it sets up all these little bits, because it's sort of like all kinds of things in book 9 are being set up right here.
Book 7 to me is very much the setup book for the like book 1 sets up the first 3 books. Book 4 sets up the next 3, and then book 7 kind of sets up the next 6, right? Like, that really is, like, until the last battle comes together. Like, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 are all kind of set up by book 7. And then the book, obviously, the final battle is the final battle.
I always, I for one thing am kind of like not really a believer in the slog, but I do understand there's a point where the story does slow down, but I've never understood why people add book 7 to it. I think book 7 is a corker. I think that it has so much stuff that goes on in it. So
The only thing I'd say is it literally takes place over 11 days. And so if you want progression in the story, like, only so much can happen in 11 days. And a lot does happen, but you're not moving forward towards the last battle. You're like, my God, we've had a year and a half in the last 6 books, and you're giving me a week?
11 days.
Like, come on, what the hell? Like, so in the actual timeline, I get where things are actually slowing down quite a bit. We're having actual less and less time pass in each book.
Yeah, and then we had to wait like 2 years for Path of Daggers.
And at the same time, more and more time was actually passing between book releases.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little did we know how spoiled we were by only having 2 years between book releases.
I didn't care so much about like that it took a while to get between, get the next book, or that the, next books were not getting us as far along as people would like, because it was just an excuse to go back and keep rereading. So if you want to know why I'm such a, hardcore trivia nerd, but I can't remember. I think Crossroads of Twilight was out when we found out that Robert Jordan was sick. And I got told that he was sick by some dweeb at the job that I was at, who was a George R.R. Martin fan and hated Robert Jordan, and had handed me a Game of Thrones and was like, you should read this, it's so much better. And I read it, and then when I gave it back to him and was like, told him that I didn't think it was better, and he looked really upset that I was just like I had slapped him or something, when I was just like, no, it's not better. He came to me and was like, Robert Jordan has this disease, and I'm like, you don't have to sound fucking happy about it, dick. And I was really sad, obviously. And so when Knife of Dreams came out and it was so good, I was like,
Yeah.
I can live with this being the end of it. I can live with telling myself the rest of the story. The one thing that I was really sad about is I really wanted to see the conflict between Egwene and Elida. I was dying to see that, and then beyond that, I was just kind of like, I can tell myself the rest of the story. It's fine. But I was pleased when it got finished. I was like, that's awesome.
No, I will never, ever, ever be sad that Brandon Sanderson finished the series after Jordan died. I will be sad that Jordan died.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I will
of
be
course.
I will be sad that Jordan didn't finish the series. And I didn't get Jordan's ending.
Books 12 and 13 have a lot of flaws to them. Book 14 has some, but there's so much in that book that has Jordan's flavor. Like, there's so much that he wrote, which makes that book so great. It was like all of a sudden Matt felt like Matt again, and so much other stuff where I'm like, he has to have written a whole bunch of this stuff. So
yeah, I think a lot of books 11 and 12 and 13 were Sanderson getting to the stuff that Jordan had wrote. He had to write that bridge, and that bridge was bumpy in some places. But I think on that note, Morgan, where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me on Twitter at Warder Gray, which is Gray with an E. There is a link to my podcast if you want to go and listen to some cool lecture-y type theme exploration stuff. It's kind of a lot of fun, and I'm not explaining it very well right now because Seth put me on the spot.
But it's good. Go listen to it.
Imagine the best English class about Wheel of Time you could ever imagine.
With lots of fuck words
Hence
in it.
the best.
Fuck words? F words.
The best, yes.
Yeah, I love putting out content for Wheel of Time, and actually this show was the one where I was like, I have lots of opinions too, and I want to do it in a topical fashion, and so that's what I do.
Yeah, we love having you on. It's really fun.
Thank you, yeah. And in case the length of the episode is no clue, we really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I was wondering if John's gonna have to do a lot of tangent editing.
Yeah, a bit, but it's really what we're here for, so.
I'm a practical person, so
Sure.
I don't know that his odds are real great. He doesn't ask any questions ever, and and it's rude to say to someone, I need you to find out whether your cancer is terminal for my own peace of mind. That's presumptuous. So it's just kind of like, I Googled his medication that he had, and I'm suspecting that it's terminal, but I don't know for sure, and so I'm just kind of stuck in this place, and it sucks, but it's just sort of like, so I'm just trying to spend a lot of time with him, and I'm trying to learn to have better social skills anyway, which includes like learning to ask people questions about themselves. And I was like, maybe I should start with my father and make use of, so I actually even learned some stuff about, his childhood and just by getting him to talk. And I'm like, I could manage that. So learn people skills with your ailing parent. But
there's a certain urgency to it when they're sick.
Yeah, there is, and it's like I'm a practical person, and death is part of life, and it's really sad. I've already lost one parent, but it is what it is, and I don't live in denial about it, and that's how I cope, and that's how I'm able to continue to be happy despite how shitty everything is. And anyway, that's sad.
It's sad. It's sad. No, and just from my own perspective, my mother had ovarian cancer, which is extremely deadly.
She was lucky.
She has done just amazingly well, and is fully cleared at this point. So modern medicine makes a difference.
Yeah. All I know about this is my dad works in editing journals about this. He's a medical editor for cancer specifically, and so I know way too many things about how awful cancer can get. Yeah, he's like editing like the drug trials, and it's like, oh, you can get 3 months or 4 months of life.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating and terrifying, and that's my real main connection with cancer. It's him being like, don't get cancer. It's bad. All the treatments are bad. I mean, not all the ones, but the ones he's generally editing are about like blood cancers in their later stages, and it's just like, ooh.
Even curable cancers, the treatment has long time. I had uterine cancer 10 years ago, and so I was able to be, have surgery, and they gave me just in case radiation, but I have permanent scar tissue, from the radiation. And every once in a while, I have chronic pain from it. It just, every once in a while, like my viscera works its way into it because it's kind of mobile down there. And then it feels like I have like in a localized place, the world's most horrible menstrual cramps just in like one spot in my side. And it's not fun, but I have a permanent prescription for Percocet for it. So that's helpful.
You win some, you lose some.
Yeah. Man, one thing I don't think kids realize is just how painful painful scar tissue can be permanent.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sitting here, most of you know I broke my jaw shortly before we started the podcast.
Right.
And, my jaw hurts right now because of that. Like,
yeah.
Often when we get to the end of a podcast, part of the reason I'll slow down is because the bones hurt where it's broken, talking does eventually wear it out. It's one of those things where you're just never going to get 100% back.
Yeah.
Just never. No matter how good surgery is, anytime they cut you, anytime there's scar tissue, anytime there's healing, it hurts sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom.
And sometimes more than others. Yeah.
My mom still complains about the cesarean scar from having my brother. She's like, sometimes it just itches and there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah. And abdominal stuff. I mean, I imagine with your face stuff, especially because it's like where your teeth are, like even icing it would be painful. I don't know, but yeah.
See, this is why I wonder why people would go for cosmetic surgery. I'm like, why would you subject yourself to this sort of thing for the rest of your life? Like, I fail to see.
Also, it doesn't look real and it's obvious that you did it.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a whole other thing, but it's just like, you have to heal from that, and then you won't ever fully heal from it. And just like, I'm good with tattoos, like, that's fine. That's all I need to make myself look pretty.
So, to bring it back to Wheel of Time, magical healing is amazing.
I know.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't have scar tissue itching with healing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question, because sometimes they describe it as fading to just a pale scar, like it's been healed for like weeks and weeks.
Yeah,
and
I've always
I'm curious
if that was an inconsistency.
Mm-hmm. What sort of residual pain do people end up having from deep wounds after healing? Is it gone like it never existed, or is it gone like an old wound that's healed? Because those are very different things.
Probably depends on the
talent of the healer?
Yeah, exactly. And maybe like how long between the injury occurring and when the healing happens. Like if you get stabbed and then immediately healed versus like you get stabbed and then it festers for a week and then you get healed. Like maybe that influences it. Probably has a lot to do with talent though.
I imagine that's the difference between a talented healer and a non-talented healer.
Right. Like Nynaeve probably never leaves a scar, right?
Yeah. On the Leaf cast about the scene where Min drags Rand upstairs after the battle at Falma, and how I call bullshit on that because he weighs 225 pounds, and my wife and I could barely get a 225-pound treadmill into our house together. But I was like, well, maybe she did it, but she definitely would have had Varen have to like heal her back afterwards.
Yeah. She probably had a little bit of like adrenaline going on to give her that extra oomph, but yeah, she must have pulled a muscle.
It's that whole mom picks up a car to save kids, burning car to save kids underneath thing that, like, you hear about in the news. Adrenaline can do crazy things in the human body, but it's like, It
was the power of horny, got her up the stairs.
Or, on the other hand, I also kind of imagine her grabbing him by his feet and just, like, his head thumping on every step as she's dragging him up the stairs, like, kerthump. Kerthump, you lummox, kerthump.
Yeah, which I've always been like, you should have brought the bedding down to the ground floor, girl. Like, why do you need to get him up to the... Like, you gave him, like, 17 concussions in addition to the stab in his side. Like...
Well, or she worked for a stable. She should have done some kind of, like, rope and pulley system, She knew how to move, like, bales of hay.
Yeah.
Or maybe she's just, like, threw him into a fireman's carry across her shoulders and, like, is, strong legs and is able to carry him up
She
the
did work in
stairs.
stables.
Yeah.
So she has the opportunity to be quite muscular, despite the fact that she's fairly small, like, in stature. She might be quite burly.
I figure she's definitely way more ripped than either my wife or I, but even so, like, it took the two of us to get that treadmill into the house, so I figure, like...
The real issue with Rand and any body of particular size is the limpness of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hauling a 225-pound weight upstairs, doable. Hauling a 225-pound limp sack of concrete up the stairs, not so much, right? Like, it's just... if you, I kind of think of, like, when you move a mattress and you, like, try and grab onto the edges of it and your fingers are painful. Even though the mattress isn't that heavy, it's just, it's the worst thing to move ever.
Yeah.
I have the best mattress ever. It has built-in straps on the side.
Yeah.
Why are they not
It's
all like
lovely.
that?
I don't know.
It's also, why doesn't all Christmas construction paper have a grid on the back, printed on the back of it?
Right? Oh, you gotta pay extra for that. It's only the good shit.
It's life's little inconveniences.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Rich people have all the benefits.
It's true.
Because they get lucky, like Matt.
You're
Matt,
trying
are we
really
going
hard to
back?
bring us into this chapter.
I've tried 2 or 3 segues now, and
It's not happening.
I'm trying to see, it's not happening. MK has a slash at the end of a lot of her typings, and Zool's asking, "What does that mean?" And she's like, "It's right next to the enter button," and I hit them both. And I was like, "Yeah." I knew as soon as I saw that, I was like, "Yeah, I do that all the time. I'm constantly just. I have look at these." For those of you who can see, I have fingers the size of sausages that don't really end in tips so much as like big flat zones.
That's fairly blunt, yeah.
It's fairly blunt. It's very hard to just hit one key. So it's one of the reasons, if you've ever gotten a message from me, especially one that I typed out on my phone, it was probably full of typos, because I have a lot of difficulty, not necessarily spelling things right, although I do have trouble with that as well, but just hitting all the keys correctly. It's just not worth correcting, because otherwise I'd never get any messages typed and sent out.
No, I have the really big handicap as far as typing on the phone, because have you ever seen my thumbs?
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
this discussion. Bluntest thumbs.
Blunt thumbs. Yep, no, I mean, mine's are slightly different.
Oh, yeah. Sort of.
Yeah. Slightly
Toe-
different shape, but we both have just flat tips of our fingers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Toe thumbs, as I've been told. Or, occasionally mocked for, which is fine.
I just have
Okay.
such tiny hands that I get the smallest phone I possibly can, which then makes the keyboard extremely small. So even though I don't think my fingers are particularly weirdly shaped, like, it's just, I can't hit, like, there's some keys that, like, it's always the space bar instead of the key I want. Or the space bar instead of the comma.
Fool of life, I correct all of my typos and make sure that I capitalize everything and do correct punctuation as well when I'm texting. And yeah, it is a problem.
I do for the most part. For some reason, I'm really okay with not capitalizing the start of my first sentence. I think it's because of Discord. I think it trained me to be like, whatever. But yeah, everything else, it's like, no, I can't have THST. Unacceptable.
I've gotten better with my actual podcast notes with being like, fuck it for whatever goes through the, transcription app. If I can read it, I'm generally okay with it. But since I've gotten better at using Google Docs and having it be easier to correct things, I've gotten a little bit more OCD again, which,
Do you transcribe your entire podcast?
I transcribe the rough draft because it helps me do the notes for the final draft.
And do you use software to do that then?
Yeah, I use a program called Otter. I pay $10 a month for it.
Okay.
So it's it takes notes. It does 2 different things. You can turn it on and it will record and transcribe at the same time. And then you can also just, upload an MP3 through it and it'll transcribe.
The one thing I've seen is that YouTube does a decent job of subtitling our episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Which I didn't realize until I went in and said, "Oh, try the automatic subtitles." And I was going through and I was like, the Wheel of Time words are all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because it has no idea what those are. But, it makes its guess, and its guess is pretty consistent as long as your pronunciation is consistent. And so you can sort of figure out what people are saying. And yeah, I was impressed. I was like, if someone asked me, how would you ever, put out a transcript of your podcast for people who can't hear, and I was like, I just direct them to YouTube channel. I mean, that's going to be as good as you're going to get for without having a couple of fans sit down and transcribe 360 episodes, which ain't gonna happen.
No.
Yeah, I mean, the transcription software really struggles with some of the WOT words. I've been able to teach it some. It still cannot, for the life of it, figure out Aes Sedai, and it has some very interesting different interpretations of it. But since I learned the replaced function on the Google Drives, which I was so excited about, I was like, holy shit. I was like, yes. So I've been using that a lot, perhaps overly obsessively, but whatever,
Morgan, you're dangerous. You're someone who's very intelligent, who's learning computers for the first time, and you're like, oh, I don't know anything about these, but all of a sudden I know these few basic commands, and then once you know that, computers are like magic. You can string them together to create more powerful things. And like, I see Morgan as the wizard in the story who like is like aged and 30 and like discovers magic for the first time, and these symbols they've been drawing their whole life, they can all of a sudden imbue with magic, and all the power explodes out of them for the first time. It's just Morgan with technology. It's like, oh, I can do things.
That sounds accurate.
It's getting there. I'm excited. What's especially exciting is I've come across a handful of problems, and when I was able to solve them for myself, I was just sort of like, it was like this sense of, like potency and energy, like, oh my god, I figured it out.
For sure. Whenever I figure out like a technical thing, instead of having to go get my husband to like explain how computers do the thing, I'm always like going in like, look what I figured out. I went on the Stack Exchange. I'm so smart. It's ridiculous.
It's just good to catch up with you, Morgan.
It is good, and I'm glad to talk as much as possible.
Yeah. Questions. Are you going to be at JordanCon or SpoilerCon?
I'm definitely going to be at SpoilerCon. I decided not to go to JordanCon this year. I let them just keep my ticket, to donate, and then I'll just buy another ticket for next year. I've got my plane ticket still, but I don't know. I'm like a real creature of habit, and so the idea of going in the summer just did not fit into my mental idea of like what needed to be happening this year. Yeah.
I'm making it happen, but my routine is not happy about it.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?